I know we all have those stories and cases that we really want the answers to before we die, and this is one of those cases for me. This is Timmothy Pitzen. He vanished off the face of the earth in 2011 after his mom picked him up early from school. Over the next 3 days, she took him to all of his favorite amusement parks and zoos and covered 500 miles. But then he disappeared, and his mom was found dead the next day in a motel. She slashed her own wrists and throat, and she left a letter saying that she was sorry, and that Timothy was safe, but that nobody would ever be able to find him again. There are so many layers to this case, and it's one that is very heartbreaking because there has never been any closure. So let's talk about it. So this is Timmothy Pitzen and his mom and dad, Amy and James. He was only 6 years old when he disappeared in 2011, but up until then he was described as a really funny and kind little boy. Everyone who knew the Pitzen family said that they loved Timothy so much. I mean, that was their only child, so he was their pride and joy. His mom and dad may have been struggling in their relationship in the years leading up to his disappearance, but it went without saying that they loved Timothy very much. At least that's what everyone who knew them said, including their extended family. So that makes the details of what I'm about to tell you even more shocking and sinister, because no one could have predicted what was about to happen. So May 11th, 2011 started out just like any other day for the Pitzen family. James dropped Timothy off at his school in Aurora, Illinois, and watched him walk into his kindergarten class. Nothing out of the ordinary. But shortly after, at around 8:15 a.m., his mom Amy checked him out. She told the school that there was some sort of family emergency, but in all reality, that was a complete lie. No such family emergency existed. Nearly 2 hours later, Amy and Timothy dropped the family car off at a repair shop, and then an employee at said repair shop actually drove them both to Brookfield Zoo, which was Timothy's favorite. That seems a little weird to me, but then again, that could be a completely normal encounter, and I could just be reading way too much into it. So then 3 p.m. hits, and that's when Amy and Timothy make their way back to the repair shop to pick up their car, and then after, Amy drove little Timothy to the Key Lime Cove Resort in Gurnee. There they had a lot of fun at the water park and spent the night. The next day, which was May 12th, 2001, they get up early and drive to the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin to have even more fun at yet another water park. At 10 the next morning, the two can be seen on the resort's security cameras in the checkout line, and by all accounts, nothing seems out of the ordinary. Nobody looked distressed, and overall, Timothy looked like he was having the time of his life. Shortly after leaving, Amy then begins to make a series of phone calls to her loved ones from her car. She calls her mom and brother-in-law, and she tells them that her and Timothy were safe and not in any danger. And she did this because now 2 days had passed since she checked her son out early from class, and then went radio silent. So during those 2 days, she had traveled nearly 500 miles without even contacting her husband, aka Timothy's dad, who was freaking out and calling her repeatedly, trying to figure out what was going on and if they were okay. It must have been really scary for the dad because he showed up at Timothy's school on the 11th, the day that he last dropped him off at school, obviously expecting him to still be there, only for the school to inform him that his mom had actually checked him out hours prior. Police were later able to determine that these series of phone calls placed Amy and Timothy just southwest of Sterling, Illinois, near Route 40. During some of those phone calls, though, Timothy could be heard in the background saying that he was hungry, so at this point, he was alive and could be accounted for. After making her very last phone call, Amy turned her phone off, and neither she or Timothy were ever heard from again. At around 7:30 that night, Amy was seen alone on security footage at a Family Dollar store in Winnebago, Illinois. There she seemed really serious, and Timothy was nowhere to be found. She ended up buying a pen, some notebook paper, and envelopes, and she kind of just kept her head down. 30 minutes later, she was seen at a Sullivan's food store in the same area, also alone. At 11:15 p.m., Amy checked into the Rockford Inn in Rockford, Illinois, alone, and either sometime that night or very early the next morning, she took her own life. She slashed both of her wrists and her throat, and then she overdosed on antihistamines. Her body wasn't found until the next morning when a housekeeper came in to clean her room. But the housekeeper didn't just find her body. They also found a note that Amy had left behind. In the note, Amy said how sorry she was for creating such a huge mess, but she reassured everyone that Timothy was safe with people who would care for him. But she promised that although he was safe, he would absolutely never be found. So obviously this was a huge shock to everyone, and not the news anyone in the Pitzen family was expecting to hear. Not only was Amy now dead, but little Timothy was still nowhere to be found. After police examined the crime scene, they found that only Amy's blood was found on the knife she used to end her life, not Timothy's, and none of Timothy's blood or DNA was found in the hotel room at all. This suggests that Timothy never stepped foot inside that room. But one thing police did find was alarming. According to them, they found a concerning amount of Timothy's blood in Amy's car, the same one that Timothy had been riding in with his mom, obviously. Here's what's confusing though. So according to the Pitzen family, the blood that was found in Amy's car was actually just from a nosebleed that Timothy had in it earlier that month. But what's confusing to to me is that I feel like the blood would be old at that point and not look fresh. So that's what I'm not able to really understand about this case, whether or not that was old or recent. Missing from the scene though was Amy's phone, the clothes that she had been seen wearing on security footage in the days prior, and Timothy, along with his clothes and his Spider-Man backpack that was filled with toys. Authorities really didn't have much to go off of, so they really examined Amy's car, and from that examination they found a bunch of weeds, dirt, and some grass stuck in the undercarriage. From their findings and using nearby CCTV, authorities concluded that at some point before killing herself, Amy parked her car in a grassy area, possibly near a stream but close to a highway. So then they extensively searched every area matching this description that Amy could have gone to dispose of Timothy's body had she killed him, but not a single trace of him was ever found. It was like he just vanished into thin air. One thing I found that was really odd was that after Amy made those last phone calls from her car, she drove to an area where she used to spend a lot of time in as a kid. This was in Dubuque, Iowa, and apparently she and her sister used to drive a ton on the back roads there going to visit their grandparents. So this felt like a promising lead and at least some connection to the case. Yet multiple searches of this area failed to turn up any evidence. As time went on, no one gave up on searching for Timothy, but there would really be no movement in this case until 2 years later. So in 2013, Amy's phone was found along Route 78. It was on a really remote road behind a grain storage building in Mount Carroll. Police were hoping that now that they finally had her phone, that they would have more answers. But sadly, there was no new information on it at all. Nothing they didn't already know, so this led nowhere. According to Timothy's aunt, so Amy's sister, Amy had a history of mental illness. She had been depressed a lot of her life, but she never let that interfere with her parenting. Timothy's aunt said that Amy was such a good mom, and she described them as two peas in a pod, basically inseparable. She said that anyone who looked at Amy thought that, wow, she was meant to be a mom. So to Timothy's dad and basically everyone else in the Pitzen family, they refused to believe that this was a murder-suicide situation. They believed that it's just physically impossible for Amy to have hurt Timothy. According to them, there would be no world where she would ever do something like that. And although his dad knew that Amy was depressed, he never once thought that Timothy was in any danger in his mom's care. Not once. In the years leading up to his disappearance, though, they had been struggling in their marriage, and it seemed like divorce may have been coming. Timothy's aunt said that since Amy struggled with her mental illness, she thought that those issues would interfere with her getting custody of her son. So it makes what happened here all that more devastating. Although we don't know what really happened to Timothy that night, there have been a few theories over the years. Theory number one, which is believed by Timothy's dad, is that he is still alive and was kidnapped by whoever Amy gave him to that day. Some think that she didn't want her husband getting custody of him so much that maybe she gave her son to some sort of underground adoption ring. If that was the case, I guess it would make sense why whoever got him never came forward after learning about Amy's death. They were partaking in something very illegal. So of course they would never come forward and would hide Timothy away from anyone who could possibly recognize him. His aunt at one point thought that he may be in a Mormon community in Mexico, but there was never any evidence to support this. Theory number two is the Occam's razor route, that Amy killed him and then she killed herself. Some think that she had planned to kill herself and that those series of final phone calls to her family were a way of saying goodbye. And over those 3 days that she spent having fun with Timothy was her way of giving him the best 3 days of his life before killing them both. And maybe she just buried him somewhere that he will never be found. A lot of people have overanalyzed the note she left. With the knowledge we have now, knowing that she and her husband were struggling, some have pointed out that Amy never specifically said that Timothy was still alive in her note, only that he would never be found. A lot of people think that when she said he was with people who would care for him, that it was a metaphor for him going to heaven. I don't really know what to believe. I mean, I hope that he is still alive and that his mom didn't harm him, but how does that explain why there was so much dirt and grass stuck underneath her car? That to me seems a little bit suspicious and like she was driving deep somewhere to dispose of something. In 2019, everyone thought that there was a major breakthrough in this case and that he was finally found, because several residents in Newport, Kentucky started calling 911 to report a teenager who was wandering the streets. This teenager looked troubled and like he was running away from something. When police finally found this boy, he was visibly shaken and distraught, and then the boy told them that his name was Timmothy Pitzen, that he was the little boy who disappeared so many years ago. But sadly, after a DNA test, this was confirmed to not be Timothy. It was all a hoax. And in fact, this was a 23-year-old man named Brian Rainey. Brian had a history of being in and out of jail, and he had some mental health issues, but he was actually sentenced to 2 years in prison for lying about this. Over the years, there have been many age-enhanced photos of Timothy of what he may look like now. If alive, he would be 21 years old today, and whatever really happened to Timothy that day after being picked up by his mom remains a mystery.